It starts with a look. Maybe it's a conversation where time seems to just vanish. We've all felt it, that magnetic pull towards someone that feels less like a simple crush and more like gravity. It's disorienting. It's intense. And usually we categorize that feeling as romance. We call it falling in love, and then we try to lock it down into a relationship script, dating, marriage, mortgage. But what if that pull isn't just biology trying to get us to reproduce? What if that tension between two people is actually a mechanism for spiritual engineering?
That is the central question we are tackling today. We're looking at a concept called the path of love, specifically drawing from the 3rd chapter of Joe Bandel's work, The Oak Matrix Unleashed. And you are right to frame it as engineering, Noah. Bandel argues that love isn't just an emotion. It is a living energy that uses the tension of opposites to force the soul to grow.
It's a heavy concept. We usually think of tension as something to avoid. If I feel tension in a relationship, my instinct is to fix it or leave. But Bandel seems to suggest that the tension itself is the point.
Precisely. He describes love as a force that unites differences. Think about the physics of it. You have expansive attraction, the pull outward toward another person, and then you have containing harmony, which is the hold inward. That creates a dynamic tension. Bandel uses the metaphor of an oak tree to illustrate this. The roots have to drink deep from the dark, heavy earth, while the branches are stretching for the intangible sky. That tree exists in a permanent state of tension between down and up. If it only went up, it would topple. If it only went down, it would never see the sun. The joy, or the life of the tree, happens in the trunk, where those opposing forces meet.
So in this model, love is the trunk. It's the resolution of the stress between two different things. That reminds me of the Hegelian dialectic in philosophy. You have a thesis, an antithesis, and the conflict between them creates a synthesis, a new, higher truth. But applying that to human connection feels risky. If we just trust the flow of this magnetic energy, as Bandel suggests, aren't we ignoring the fact that some magnetic poles are destructive? Biology can be messy. Sometimes that spark is just trauma recognizing trauma.
That is the critical nuance, and Bandel actually addresses this, though we need to layer in some modern psychology to fully unpack it. He warns that the danger lies in forcing the fit. If you are pursuing status or ignoring red flags, you block the flow. From a psychological perspective, what Bandel calls a magnetic pole overlaps heavily with the concept of limbic resonance. Our nervous systems are open loops. We regulate each other. Sometimes, yes, we are drawn to what hurts us because it's familiar. But Bandel is talking about a bio-spiritual pull that leads to wholeness, not just repetition. He frames it as an intelligent flow. If a connection mirrors what you need, calm to steady your fire, or ideas to ignite your creativity, that is the sacred union. It's functional, not just emotional.
Okay, so let's get into the mechanics of how this growth happens. The text outlines what he calls 3 ordeals. The word ordeal suggests a trial by fire, something difficult, but his description sounds surprisingly gentle. He talks about connecting to light, grounding in earth, and building inner layers. Why call them ordeals?
I think he uses ordeal in the mythological sense, an initiation rite. These aren't punishments, they are thresholds you have to cross to expand your capacity for love. The first ordeal is connecting to a greater light. This is about opening to something larger than your ego, whether you call it the divine spark, universal love, or just interconnectedness. It is the realization that you are not the center of the universe.
Which is ironic because when you fall in love, you often feel like you and that other person are the only two people in the universe. It's incredibly egocentric in a way. But he's saying you need to connect to a universal source first.
Exactly. If you look at Abraham Maslow's hierarchy of needs, he eventually added self-transcendence at the very top, above self-actualization. Bandel is saying that to engage in this high-level love, you first need to sit in stillness and feel that connection to the whole, that creates a tension of longing for meaning, which then, and this is a key phrase in the text, leaps to clarity. You get a vision that guides your choices.
Then comes the second ordeal, grounding in Earth's vitality. This feels like the counterbalance. If the first step is head in the clouds spiritualism, this is feet in the dirt realism. He literally suggests walking barefoot on grass.
It is bioenergetic grounding. We live in a very digital, cerebral world. We are often disconnected from our own physical vessels. Bandel argues that energy rises through the body. You cannot sustain a high-voltage connection with another person if your own wiring is frayed. By touching the earth, feeling the soil, you anchor yourself in the present. It turns disconnection into grounded joy. If you look at somatic therapy today, this is standard practice. You cannot process high emotion if you aren't in your body. So you have the light, ordeal 1, and the earth, ordeal 2. That sets the stage for the third ordeal,
which is building inner layers of soul. This is where the actual interaction happens, right? Deep conversations, vulnerability, touch.
Yes, he compares this to the rings of an oak tree. Every honest conversation, every moment of shared vulnerability adds a layer of substance to your soul. This is where the work happens. It requires clear thinking, deep feeling, and strong will. Bandel makes an interesting point here. Effort builds tension. Openness releases new gifts. You have to put in the effort to communicate, to be vulnerable, which creates emotional tension. But when you relax into that tension, you get a breakthrough, a new layer of intuitive knowing.
I want to pivot to the symbolism he uses for the types of love, because this is where the text gets very archetypal. He distinguishes between the serpent path and the dove path. Now, historically, the serpent has a pretty bad rap in Western culture, usually associated with deception or evil, but Bandel frames it as sacred. What is the serpent path here?
We have to look at this through the lens of ancient symbology predating the common Christian interpretation of the snake. In Kundalini Yoga, for instance, the serpent represents the primal life force energy coiled at the base of the spine. In alchemy, the serpent often represents matter, earth, in the transformative power of nature. Bandel aligns the serpent path with grounded physical love. This is love expressed to the body, intimacy, family, community, hugs. It's earthy. It fuels what he calls primal joy.
So it's the root system again. It's the security, the warmth of a body next to you. It's the tangible proof that you aren't alone.
Correct. And then you have the dove path. In alchemy and Christian mysticism, the dove represents the descent of the spirit, or the sublimated volatile element. It is air, mind, and spirit. Bandel defines this as uplifting, heart-centered love. This is the connection of ideas, shared visions, deep philosophical talks. It raises the energy upward.
It seems like most modern relationship advice tells us we need to find one person who is both. We want the best friend, dove, and the passionate lover, serpent, all wrapped in one package. Bandel says they are complementary, but does he imply we need to get them from the same source?
He implies that we need to embody both to be whole, and that love expresses itself in these two ways. He writes, like an oak's roots, serpent, and branches, dove, sinking in the trunk, both paths empower by trusting love's wisdom. He suggests we can practice the serpent path through simple affection, and the dove path through open-hearted sharing. The crucial takeaway is that neither is superior. A lot of spiritual circles tend to denigrate physical, earthy love as lower and elevate the mental, spiritual love as higher. Bandel flattens that hierarchy. The roots are just as sacred as the branches.
I like that democratization of love. It validates the person who feels love most deeply when they're just cooking dinner for their family, just as much as the poet who writes sonnets about soulmates. But I want to go back to the idea of the leap. Throughout the text, Bandel mentions that tension gathers and then leaps to harmony or insight. This sounds like quantum mechanics, the quantum leap where an electron jumps energy levels without passing through the space in between. How does this apply to our daily interactions?
That is a brilliant analogy. In relationships, we often think progress is linear. We date for 3 months, we get 10% closer. But Bandel is describing a non-linear progression. You hold the tension, maybe it's a difficult disagreement, or a moment of intense attraction that you don't act on immediately. You don't force a resolution, you stay in that uncomfortable charged space. And suddenly, pop, you leap to a new level of understanding. The tension resolves into a higher form of order. This aligns with the theory of dissipative structures in chemistry proposed by Ilya Prigogine. Friction and chaos, if contained, eventually reorganize into a higher level of complexity. Bandel is saying our souls do the same thing.
The prerequisite for that, though, is trust. And that's the hardest part. The text repeatedly says, don't chase or control. In a culture that tells us to manifest our destiny, to go get what we want, to swipe right until we find the one, don't control feels counterintuitive. It feels passive.
It feels passive only if you view action as the only form of agency. Bandel is advocating for receptive agency. He uses the phrase drinking deeply. You aren't just sitting there, you are actively receiving and experiencing the moment. He says a true connection mirrors what you need. If you are busy chasing what you think you want, you might miss the mirror that is standing right in front of you. The empowerment comes from saying yes to genuine pulls and no to draining ones. That is an active choice, but it's based on resonance, not conquest.
Let's look at the practical applications he offers, because for all this talk of bio-spiritual energy, he gives some very specific homework. He suggests a love journal, but not the kind where you write about your crush. He wants you to note the opposites.
Right. He suggests reflecting on a connection and noting the polarities. Your drive versus their calm. Your skepticism versus their faith. This is essentially shadow work, a concept from Carl Jung. By identifying the opposite quality in someone else, you are often identifying a dormant part of yourself. If I'm attracted to your calmness, it's likely because my own internal calmness is underdeveloped and seeking expression. Writing this down moves it from a subconscious compulsion to a conscious integration.
He also suggests an oak ritual, visualizing the trunk as love's union. It sounds a bit druidic.
It is deeply druidic. The oak has always been a symbol of the axis mundi, the center of the world connecting heaven, earth, and underworld. The ritual is about internalization. You aren't just looking at a tree, you're using the tree's architecture as a template for your own psyche. You ask what love awakens. It's a prompt to check your internal weather. Are you all roots today? All branches? How is the trunk holding up?
There's one more practical exercise that stood out to me, the energy sync. He talks about one person leaning into the spark or vision and the other leaning into nurture or care. This sounds like role-playing, but energetic role-playing.
It is a practice of polarity. In any dynamic system, if both people try to be the spark at the same time, you get an explosion or burnout. If both try to be the nurture, you might get stagnation. Bandel suggests consciously playing with these energies. Can I hold the space, serpent earth, while you explore a wild new idea, dove light? Then can we switch? It teaches flexibility. It prevents us from getting stuck in rigid roles, which is where relationships often die.
It leads back to that core idea of the chapter, sacred union for soul growth. It redefines the purpose of other people in our lives. They aren't there to make us happy. They aren't there to complete us, as the old Jerry Maguire line goes. They are there to provide the resistance and the reflection necessary for us to grow deeper roots and higher branches.
And that growth is the ecstatic now, Bandel concludes with. When you stop fighting the tension and start using it as fuel, you become fully alive in the present. You aren't waiting for the relationship to get better in the future. You are experiencing the aliveness of the friction right now.
It's a demanding philosophy. It asks us to be brave enough to feel the tension without snapping, but it also offers a relief. We don't have to force the river. We just have to learn how to swim in it.
Exactly. Like the oak, we don't have to run around trying to find the sun or the water. We just have to stand our ground, reach out, and let the nature of life flow through us.
If this conversation sparked a little tension or a new idea in you, don't let it fade. Send this episode to the person who acts as your mirror, whether they ground you or help you fly.